Game. 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 So good to be at the original USC with the beautiful people of Columbia, South Carolina. Thank you for having us out. Thank you for such a warm welcome. Thank you for what you've done with the weather here today. It's beautiful. I love it. I can't tell you how great it is to be greeted in this community by the mayor of this community, an absolute exceptional leader. I've known mayors and city council members, presidents and governors. Mayor Benjamin stands out, every single word positive, focused on the future, the great things that we can do if only we will come together to do it. The pride that he sees in this community and every single person in this community. As we say in Texas, y'all means all of us. Y también decimos que no me importa who you pray to, who you love, what party affiliation you are, the color of your skin, how many generations you can count yourself an American, or whether you just got here yesterday. All that matters now is here we are together in this same country, in the same fight, with the same opportunities before us. I just met a gentleman, I believe his name is Don Fowler, who's back there. So, if you can't see him, I will describe him. He's wearing a Wofford hat. I'm going to say that again. He's wearing a Wofford hat and a Kentucky sweatshirt. And seeing him, meeting him and his wife right now, getting to catch a little bit of the game last night, thinking about the March Madness where South Carolina is playing such an important hosting role. I also think about something that may not make sense and may not seem connected at the outset. Being in Rock Hill earlier today, you were there too? Right on. And getting to meet a gentleman named Willie McLeod, who was one of the Friendship Nine, who in that community in 1960 and 1961 protested the segregation of his fellow citizens in that community in front of the diner, which he and then 8 other of his fellow citizens and Americans went into, where previously they were allowed only to buy the merchandise inside, but never to sit at the counter. Sat at that counter nonetheless, knowing full well that he would be dragged out, hauled into jail, where he was with 8 other members of his community, refused to post bail, and sat in that cell for more than 30 days, seeking to galvanize the conscience of his community, of this state, and of this country, a country premised on the fact that all of us are created equal. Willie McLeod wanted to insist that we were. I was telling your mayor a little bit about my hometown of El Paso, Texas. And for the 3 of you from El Paso, thank you for being here. You know that with Ciudad Juarez, we form one half of the largest binational community in this hemisphere. 3 million from 2 countries, 2 traditions and histories and cultures, joined, not separated by the Rio Grande River, forming something far greater, far more powerful than the sum of our parts or our people. El Paso, one of the safest cities in the United States of America, because it is a city of immigrants. And it is in that same city. It's in that same city in 1924, a doctor named Lawrence Nixon arrived. Had grown up in East Texas in Marshall, where after finishing college and medical school, he attempted to practice medicine, but because he was an African American in a community that would not accept his genius or allow him to practice his profession, he moved to El Paso, where he started the first chapter of the NAACP in the state of Texas. It was in El Paso, and where, after paying his poll tax, he showed up to vote in the state and local elections and was turned away because of the color of his skin. Now, he took that case and that injustice and his courage and others in that community all the way to the Supreme Court twice, finally, after 20 years, winning a ruling that integrated the heretofore all-white primary in the state of Texas. 20 years of persistence, of fighting, of courage. That victory, that struggle, that outcome, not lost on Thelma White, who graduated from the all-black Douglas High School in El Paso because it was the only school that she was allowed to attend, had the audacity to try to enroll in Texas Western College, and because of the segregation clause in our state's constitution, she was rejected admission based on the color of her skin. She persisted, enlisted the help of a little-known attorney named Thurgood Marshall, took that case up to the federal bench of R.E. Thomason, and thanks to her courage and the example of Dr. Nixon, they were able not just to integrate Texas Western College, but every institution of higher learning in our state and struck down the segregation clause in our Constitution. So then when Bert Williams, one of my predecessors on the El Paso City Council, arrives and tries to have dinner with Nolan Richardson at the Oasis restaurant in El Paso in 1961, and Nolan is not served because of the color of his skin, Bert goes back to his city council office and writes what would become the first passed, enacted desegregation law in the former Confederacy, ensuring that places of public accommodation are open to everyone. That ordinance is vetoed by the mayor. Bert Williams and his colleagues in our community overrode that veto. Now this is how it connects to basketball. Don Haskins, Basketball Hall of Fame legendary coach in our community, was seeking to build the best possible basketball team that the NCAA had ever seen. But it was very difficult to recruit African American players to a community where they would have to sit in the back of the bus, where they could not eat at the lunch counter, where they could not watch the movies or even enter the movie theater by the same door as everyone else. But Haskins was able to tell those prospective recruits that here in El Paso, we have a community that President John Fitzgerald Kennedy called out as one of the first and leading cities of the former Confederacy to get right with our morals and our foundational document, and they would be afforded the dignity and the respect and the human rights that they deserved in this country. He was able to build one of the best all-time men's basketball teams in the history of this country, and in 1966, they defeated Kentucky for the national championship with an all-black starting five. The only city, the only school in the state of Texas in the history of the tournament to produce a national champion. It was Dr. Nixon, it was Thelma White, it was Thurgood Marshall, it was Bert Williams, it was Nolan Richardson. It was all of them working together to produce the necessary change and the ultimate victory that we saw in '66. I want to make sure that that inspiration of the Friendship Nine, of the story that I just told you about El Paso, carries us through these incredibly challenging, difficult times. Because if you think about it, there's never been a host of challenges like those that we face right now. This, the wealthiest, the most powerful country on the face of the planet, that watches millions of our fellow Americans suffer without the ability to see a doctor, afford their prescriptions, or take their child to a therapist. Our fellow human beings dying of diabetes and the flu and curable cancers because we have not found the political will to do the right thing when it is right in front of us. Guaranteed, high quality, universal health care for every child, every woman, every man. And in a country where one of the largest providers of mental health care services is the county jail system, so that people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder are literally getting arrested on purpose to go to the one place where they are guaranteed a roof over their heads, clothes on their back, a meal in front of them, a prescription to the psychotropic medication that might temporarily make life worth living at an extraordinary cost to you and to me as taxpayers, and to those who lose out on the potential and the lives of those who have so much left to contribute. Healthcare in a country that is still suffering from a maternal mortality crisis 3 times as deadly for women of color as it is for white women in this country. Healthcare has to mean primary healthcare. It has to mean specialty healthcare. It has to mean mental health care. And it has to mean every woman makes her own decisions about her own body. In a country that has the largest prison population per capita of any other country on the face of the planet, a prison population disproportionately comprised of people of color, so many there for nonviolent drug crimes, too many for possession of marijuana, a substance that is legal in more than half the states of the Union. Think about this. We have an opioid crisis in this country. We lost more than 70,000 of our fellow Americans to drug overdose deaths last year. We are 4% of the globe's population. We consume 85% of the globe's opioids. And almost everyone who is buying heroin and fentanyl on the street today first began that journey into addiction with a lawfully prescribed opioid. Purdue Pharma, that company, its directors, the executives who knew full well the addictive properties of what they sold as a miracle medication to doctors and prescribers have faced no accountability or any significant consequences for the harm that they have unleashed on this country, on our communities, and on our fellow Americans. And yet, though Americans of all races use illegal drugs at the same rate, use marijuana at the same rate, chances are more likely than not that it will be a person of color arrested for possession, serving time, who upon release will be required to check a box stating that he or she has had a conviction on any employment application form, making it that much less likely that they get the job, that they earn enough to feed themselves and their families, now disqualified for a student loan to come to USC to improve their prospects and continue their higher education, their future constrained, their choices narrowed. How can we have a system of justice so patently unjust that allows some who are responsible for the deaths of thousands to go away scot-free and others for simply possessing a substance already legal in most of the country, sitting behind bars? Let's end the war on drugs, the war on people. Let's end the federal prohibition of marijuana. And let's expunge the arrest records of everyone who's done time for possessing a substance that is legal in so many places. When we look at this economy, we understand that it works too well for too few, not well enough to too many more. How can this country produce people and families and wealth that allows some to spend $3 or $4 million to game and defraud the college admissions process? And there are other families who do not have $300 or $400 as a down payment on tuition or books or rooming or board. Let's face the fact that we have $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt in this country right now, that every graduating college senior will have on average now $40,000 on average on their backs that they will carry, a drag on themselves and their families, a drag on this economy and all of us. A president in office right now who seeks to wipe clean not the debt that they are holding, but the public service loan forgiveness program. A president who wants to defund federally subsidized student loans, meaning that you're going to pay more at higher interest rates for the education that allows you to unleash your potential and live to your full promise. For what purpose? To build a 2,000-mile, 30-foot high, $30 billion wall at a time of record safety and security. And not only that, those Those whom we are apprehending at our southern border by and large, those who turn themselves in the parlance of the Border Patrol, arresting themselves, are kids. And if they are lucky, they are kids with their parents who at their most vulnerable and desperate moment, after 2,000 miles on foot, sometimes atop, not inside of a train known as the Beast or La Bestia, the length of Mexico, here at our front door at the Texas-Mexico border, what do? What have we done? Taking that very child for whom that mother has risked her life, turning that mom over to DOJ, then to ICE, deporting her back to the very country from which she fled, putting that child in a cage, separating them with no hope or prospect of knowing when they will or if they will ever be reunited. Though we would like to lay this at the foot or the feet of one man, one administration, or one political party in a democracy where the people are the government and the government is the people, every day that these conditions persist, it's on every single one of us. So let's use that money that the president wants to spend, keep it within these student loan programs, and then fund immigration judges, fund the ability to take in more refugees to this country, to resettle them here in the United States, fund our ability to get right with our values, the reality we have here on the ground, and to make the most of those who are already contributing so much, freeing every single one of the more than 1 million dreamers in this country from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in the country to which they've already contributed so much. If we hope to successfully face and overcome and prevail on any of these challenges, if we hope to face and overcome the greatest challenge of them all, the existential threat of climate change, while there is still time before it is too late, where 300 years after the Enlightenment, if we will still listen to the scientists, and I for one do, they tell us beyond the shadow of a doubt that the fires that we see in California, the 58 inches of rain that fell from the sky in Houston and Southeast Texas, taking lives along with it, the third 500-year flood in just 5 years, the droughts through which our farmers attempt to persist, undermining our ability to grow our own food and fiber, to feed and clothe not just ourselves, but so much of the rest of the world. If 400,000 apprehensions on the southern border is a problem, imagine what will happen when this globe continues to cook and some countries in the Western Hemisphere can no longer support human life. Those people will go somewhere, I guarantee you. Now, if we want our kids to look back from the future, 30, 40, 50 years from now, with pride instead of disgust, then we have to also acknowledge that those scientists tell us there are 12 years within which to act to get this right. Bold change, freeing ourselves from fossil fuels, investing in renewable energy, reasserting our rightful role on the global stage to convene the nations of this planet around an otherwise intractable problem before it is too late. But all of this, every single challenge and opportunity premised on the single greatest mechanism that humankind has ever devised to bring the will of a people together, and that is democracy. A democracy right now that is broken, a democracy that needs to be fixed, a democracy that is captured and corrupted by corporations and special interests. It's why this campaign takes not a dime from a single political action committee. No PACs, no corporations, no special interests, no lobbyists, all people in every state, everywhere, ensuring that we come together at this deeply divided, highly polarized, hyper-partisan moment and get around and get after the work before us. I want to make sure that this campaign is all about bringing people together. Whatever your party affiliation, whatever country your folks came from, whatever the differences, do not allow them to divide us now. This is the moment that we come together. And for those reasons, I'm running to serve you as the next president of the United States of America. Thank you for having us out. Very, very, very grateful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. We're taking a question. All right, we are going to take some questions, some comments, your suggestions, your ideas. I will do my best to answer concisely so that we bring as many voices into the conversation as possible.
Okay, we have our first question over here.
Hi, thank you so much for coming to Columbia. I had a question. I am a mom. My husband's an educator, and last year we spent about $11,000 on childcare for our son. And I took 12 weeks for leave that I had to use my time for. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of your plan or some thoughts on maternity leave in this country and early childhood education.
First of all, thank you for your commitment to public service. Thank you for teaching. In my home state of Texas, nearly half of teachers are working a second or third job just to make ends meet. Despite the fact that they have the most important job in front of them, those kids who, if we can unlock their lifelong love of learning, there is absolutely no stopping them in the things that they want to do. Those teachers who out of their own pocket, on average in Texas, pull out $800 every year, not just for the decorations, not just for the school supplies, but for that kid on free and reduced breakfast and lunch who does not have a dinner waiting for her when she gets home. That kid who's shown up in the same jeans and t-shirt Monday through Thursday. By Friday, that teacher has bought him a new set of clothes because she understands that his potential to learn is connected to his dignity and his feeling of self-worth. Those teachers who we already asked to do so much, including contemplating an active shooter coming into that classroom and taking those kids for whom she has served her entire life. A teacher should be paid a living wage. That teacher should have paid family leave, as should every single American. If you want to raise your family, take care of your folks, take care of your own health care, then let's make sure that we invest in your ability to do it. It is a small price to pay for the return that we will receive, not just in your well-being and being a more moral and just country, but in what you will produce and be able to deliver for the rest of our benefit over the course of your lifetime. So paid family leave is absolutely important. Thank you.
Hi, I'm so glad you brought up climate change. You were the largest recipient of fossil fuel money in your Senate race. I know that 5 of the candidates have already said they're not going to take fossil fuel money. Will you promise to not take fossil fuel money in this race?
Thank you for the question. This Senate race that you referred to in Texas, we were lucky enough, without taking a single dime from a single PAC or special interest, to raise nearly $80 million, all from people, small contributions. I think the average was $44. And so, as you can imagine, in Texas, there are a lot of people. They may be out in the field, they may be engineers, they may be welders, they may be truck drivers, they may be secretaries who are working for oil and gas companies. And yes, I think we were among the top recipients for oil and gas donations, $40, $10, $100, $1,000 at a time. But we're also the single largest recipient of hairdresser money and pharmacist money and doctors and school teachers and just about every profession, because the people of Texas and some of you here in South Carolina stepped up and made sure that in a state that was thought to be so reliably red that no Democrat ever competed or really feared to tread, that if we banded together, went to every one of the 254 counties, did not allow oil and gas, any corporation, any special interest to purchase access to corrupt or give the appearance of corruption, we might just win. And though we did not, we came awfully close, 2.6%, we changed democracy in politics in Texas. We used to rank 50th in the country in voter turnout, not by accident, by design. Some people, because of their race, literally drawn out of a congressional district. Young people realizing that our state had not been a contender for decades, not showing up. By going everywhere for everyone, serving no one but the people I wanted to represent. Young voter turnout in Texas up 500%. Total turnout up, approaching presidential year levels. 2 members of Congress won their seats in 2018 in safe Republican districts because of the turnout. And in Harris County, home to Houston, our largest city, the most diverse community in the United States of America, 17 African American women won judicial positions, changing the face of criminal justice in that state. So I serve people and people only, not PACs, corporations, or special interests.
Yeah, how you doing today? I wanted to ask you a question. The last couple presidents we had, candidates running for president, nobody addressed the issue, and it ain't no black or white thing, of young black men being killed by police, women, even white people being killed, and these police keep getting off. The prosecutors are not prosecuting them, and look like the president sit there, nobody addressed this issue and be serious, come on TV and say, this is enough. Every day you turn on the news, somebody killed in handcuffs. How do you get killed in handcuffs? Nobody is focusing on addressing this issue, and America see it, and that's the vision.
Thank you for the question. You're absolutely right. Too many African American men being killed in this country, being shot. Too many women, Sandra Bland, many other names that we could raise right now, who has suffered injustice as part of a criminal justice system that does not effectively and functionally treat all lives equally. I think we have to go back to some of the foundational, structural, systemic problems of racism, the effects of slavery and segregation and active suppression taking place in this country right now. When you're 5 years old in a kindergarten classroom, and if you're African American, you stand 5 times the likelihood of being suspended or disciplined or expelled. You understand a schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline that begins not in high school, but begins in kindergarten, that begins to inform every way in which we treat each other. That maternal mortality death rate connected both to a woman's right to be able to go to a family planning clinic and get a cervical cancer screening, see a family planning provider, see a doctor of any kind, but it is also a function of racism in our healthcare system. Listening to African American women who I sought to represent in Texas, they told me even when I do get into a clinic, I am treated differently than white women who go into that same clinic, treated by the same providers. In our educational system, if we want better outcomes, we're going to try to hire and retain teachers who look like their students. In our criminal justice system, we're going to make sure that every police officer, every sheriff's deputy gets the training and the support that they need to enforce the law, but also receives the accountability and are subject to the same rule of law that every man, every woman in this country should be subject to, regardless of whether they're in a position of power, wear a badge, or wear a gun. There has to be accountability. On some of these specific solutions, there's a lot of federal money that goes to local police forces that far too often has militarized these local police forces. I think that money needs to be contingent upon accountability, transparency, reporting on use of force and against whom force is used in our communities. We need to end this war on drugs that has become a war on people. And as I made the case earlier, it's a war on some people more than others. There are tragic mortal consequences to this war, and they are borne disproportionately by people of color in this country. So I want to make sure that in addition to police accountability, we look at the entire system of criminal justice, but the entire system of education, of healthcare, of participation in our democracy in a state like Texas, where you can use your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are at the ballot box, but you cannot use your student ID from Texas Southern University to prove who you are at the ballot box. When we bring everybody into this economy, into this democracy, when we have equal opportunity for every child born in this country, which we are nowhere close to doing right now, we're going to have better outcomes and we are going to save more lives. Thank you for the question.
I have time for just a few more.
Hi. What do you believe is the best way to achieve universal health care, and do you believe in a single-payer Medicare for all system?
So if the goal is high quality, universal, and guaranteed health care, and I say guaranteed, it's a word that I learned from people who lost a loved one who had insurance, but might not have had enough money to make the copay on flu medication, and that loved one died of the flu. Or being in Keokuk, Iowa at the start of this campaign, meeting a woman whose daughter's copay is $444 on her prescription. That is after insurance has kicked in. Being in Coos, Iowa, meeting a woman whose prescription cost is $10,000 a year. She's supposed to take 3 pills a day, but she cannot afford to take the prescribed amount. She's rationing her medication so that she can live, put food on the table. So if the goal is everyone, it's guaranteed, and it's high quality, the best path that I know of to get there now is to ensure that those who have insurance, very often employer-based, and like it, and like their network, and like their doctors, are able to keep it. Those who do not like the insurance that they have, whose deductibles they cannot bridge, whose copays and premiums they cannot afford, should be able to enroll in Medicare. And the millions of our fellow Americans who right now have no insurance or no prospects for health care at all should also be enrolled in Medicare. 2 women with whom I served in Congress, Jan Schakowsky of Illinois, Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, have introduced a bill that meets this definition and is, I think, the fastest and surest way for us to get there. It's called Medicare for America. I think it has the best chance of bringing people who may or may not agree with a single-payer system, but understand that not caring for one another is not only immoral, it's an incredibly expensive way to fail our fellow Americans. So that's the path that I believe we should take. Thank you for asking the question.
I have time for 2 more. Sorry, guys.
Yes. With reparations being with reparations being a hot topic nowadays, it was reported that in 2016 that the U.S. owes that it was reported that the UN says that the U.S. owes Black people, more specifically African descendants of slavery, reparations. But there was a Washington Times article saying that you oppose reparations, traditional reparations for Black people. So why should I, as a Black man, vote for you when you oppose reparations?
Thank you for the question and the opportunity to address one of the most important and certainly the most foundational issue for this country. A country whose foundation was literally built on the backs of slaves, those who were brought here in bondage from other countries against their will, who effectively had no ability to enjoy the fruits of their labor, the wealth that they helped to build, who after the end of slavery were still kept down, were suppressed, were pressed into convict gangs to do work for profit for their white owners, literally worked to death. There was a graveyard just uncovered, a common grave outside of Houston, decades after the end of the Civil War, where from the forensic evidence we can see that people were literally worked to death, their muscles torn from their bones. The consequence of segregation, suppression in our democracy, redlining, and the ability to be able to get a mortgage or a loan. If this is a capitalist country, and whether you like it or not, it is, then capital is key. And if you have no access to capital, to build wealth, to be able to pass on that house to your child, to help them with the seed capital to start a business, you are denying an entire people based on their race the ability to advance in this economy and in this country. There is 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in Black America today. And whatever education you receive, that disparity will continue to be there until we make structural changes. The rate of infant mortality in the United States in 2019 is greater between white women and Black women than it was in 1850, 10 years before the Civil War started. So I say all this to share with you that I begin, and just begin, I will acknowledge, to understand some of the challenges and some of the wrongs that we have committed and the need for reparation, for repair. I think the best way for us to proceed, and I've listened to people who've done incredible work on this, Brian Stevenson, who in Montgomery, Alabama, helped to build that memorial to peace, to justice, to call out not just our civil rights victories, which I started with at the beginning of my comments, but to talk about lynchings, to talk about brutality, to talk about this state turning against some of its own citizens based on the color of their skin. He says that the process of reparations begins with the truth, with every single American, regardless of your background or the color of your skin, knowing our common history and these common facts. It then goes into repairing these systems that I just described that are systematically racist. A school system that desperately needs more teachers who look like the students before them so we can stop punishing kids based on their race and setting them up for failure over the course of their lives. A war on drugs that has targeted people of color to predictable results, producing the largest prison population anywhere in the world. A healthcare system, a daily life of indignity visited upon African American women and men, a weathering that they have experienced, which has produced health consequences that mean shorter lives, diminished lives because not able to achieve to their full potential in a country that, whether we wittingly want to or not, is keeping them down. I think if we invest in fixing these institutions in this country and ensuring that a state like mine and perhaps a state like yours, we do not use racist voter ID laws to keep people from selecting their representatives or racially gerrymander them out of their districts in the first place. If we ensure that everyone who has a conviction after they have paid their price, done their time, can vote, can get ahead, if we expunge the arrest records for nonviolent drug crimes in this country, then I think we just begin to get to some of that repair. That is the path that I would pursue after listening to and reflecting on those who are much smarter and, frankly, as a white man, much more experienced in the injustice and the indignity that I just described. Thank you for asking the question. Okay,
This is the last question.
Hey, Beto. I just want to say thank you so much for coming out. I know we all really appreciate it. I'm a junior in college, and many of us here are college students as well, and we'll be graduating with a whole lot of college debt, and if we plan on going into higher education, that's even more debt on top of that. So I was just hoping you could address the college debt situation and what your plans were, if you have any, to address that.
Great, thank you very much. Question is about college debt. Do I have any English majors? All right. Well, all 5 of you will understand that one of the reasons Amy and I named our firstborn Ulysses is because we didn't have the guts to name him Odysseus. And you'll also know the look I saw on my dad's face when I came home my sophomore year and told him I was going to be an English major. Because he knew that every single semester I was in school, I was taking out student loans, working a work-study job, and that he and my mom on their own had personally taken out loans to fund my education. So why, Beto, do you want to sit around and read books all day when you could become an engineer or an accountant or an attorney or a doctor? This is a very expensive education that we were all paying for you. I mentioned $40,000 as the average load that graduating college seniors will have on their backs going forward, $1.5 trillion nationally. I want to make sure that we do not continue to dig the hole that we're in any deeper. I want to make sure that you are both college and career ready graduating from high school. If you want to join an apprenticeship at a union, if you want to go to a community college, if you want to go to a publicly financed public 4-year institution in your state, you should not take on a dime of debt. Costs should not be a barrier to your advancement, because when you do better, educational attainment is correlated with income and all of the great things that you are training for right here in your life. Not only do you benefit, but this country as a whole is a beneficiary of those things that you were born to do, that you're now equipped and educated enough to perform. In addition, I want to make sure that if you are currently carrying some of that debt, that we invest in your ability to refinance it at lower rates, that we invest in your ability to have it wiped clean if you're willing to serve in your community, especially if you're willing to serve those who have served in other capacities. Those women and men who put their lives on the line for this country in Vietnam and did not return to a hero's welcome, but came back to their communities, raised their kids, got after it, built so much of the success that my generation has enjoyed. Those women and men who are putting their lives on the line right now in our wars since 9/11 that we are still fighting 18 years later and counting. There are 45 to 49,000 positions at the VA that we have agreed to fund, to authorize, but are now unfilled. No one's working in them. We have long wait times all over this country for those women and men to get in and get the care they need for the post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, traumatic amputations that they suffered in service to this country. We are losing 20 veterans a day by their own hand. Every single day, 16 of those 20 unable, unwilling to go to a VA because perhaps of the wait times or the inability to see someone who could save their lives. If you're willing to work at a VA, for example, if you're willing to teach school in a community that is desperate for your talent and what you want to contribute to those kids' potential, if you want to move back to a community that is in need of its revitalization, in the young people who can come back and work in-demand jobs that are unfilled today, that is an investment worth making for this country to make sure that we wipe clear your debt for the national service that you will provide. So we got to stop digging the hole and then help those who already have that debt burden on their backs. Thank you all for having us out here today. Very, very grateful. We will see you back in Columbia. Thank you very much. Thanks for wearing the shirt. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.